Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Sorry for the delay. I was looking for a specific clip and for whatever reason I could not find it. The only place I found it, oddly enough, RT. Covering British politics. It takes a Russian television to make the clip. So, nevertheless, Brexit. Let me check my sound, make sure nothing has changed between videos. I hope all of you are doing okay tonight. I know it's not nighttime everywhere, but it's like Thomas After Dark or something. All right, that works. So, Brexit. Let's hop across the pond. Big things are happening in the UK. Amazing things are happening in the UK. Fascinating things are happening in the UK. Things that may actually change the contour and the character of the government in the UK. I've joked that Theresa May is a zombie, prime minister, zombie, walking. Bits are falling off her. Boris Johnson left. Big, flashy, dramatic display. The dream of Brexit is dying, and I cannot stay here in this situation. David Davis, Brexit secretary. Again, dramatic resignation, saying that what the prime minister is doing is somewhat of a fraud and is going to put Britain as a rule taker in this kind of vassal state status. So you can understand that the prime minister had to bring in the B squad or the C squad, however you want to call it. And now they are running the show. Raab is the new Brexit secretary. He's taken the place of David Davis. And he was supposed to deliver a statement yesterday to Parliament. I'm going to show you how that went. Chaos. Utter and complete shambles. Let's take a look at what took place, because it is a good description of what not to do when you are given a statement to Parliament. Now, here's the other point to this, or the other kind of thing I want to make. I'm going to split the video up, meaning I want to do this video on the amateurish performance that essentially was taking place with Raab, and I'm going to second go through what's in the white paper. Beano. Brexit in name only. That's what's in that white paper. That paper is an utter capitulation before one shot is even fired. Meaning, before she even talks to the EU, this document may be dead on arrival, and this document just goes through the habit of changing the names of stuff to try to make it look like something major is taking place. To put it like, let's say it this way. I'll hold it in another one. But Brexit in name only. The people who are attacking this document aren't necessarily wrong for what they're saying about the document. It would put Britain in a situation where it is a rule taker. If the EU changes its rules, Britain will probably have to change its rules also. Otherwise, it would lose access to the single market. The access to the single market at that point is going to be entirely dependent upon by the EU, or chosen or determined by the EU. Now, that's the reality of it. Now, Britain, yes, can change its laws in the same way that Britain can change its laws right now, but it will lose access to the single market, meaning the incentive structure is for them not to do it. Even now, you're trying to leave now, and you're not able to leave now. And so the whole point that you're not able to leave now, and the problem is access to the single market. That's the issue here. That's the tether. That's the thing that they leaning in on you on. The Brexiteers' point is, look, all of this stuff about we have regulatory alignment and all this other stuff, we can change our rules when we want. Yes. But again, in changing those rules, you lose access, which means you're not going to change those rules, which is the reason why you're not changing those rules now, and you're maintaining that regulatory alignment now. There's even a legal question on whether or not you can do trade deals with the plan that Theresa May is talking about. Because how can you do a trade deal when at any point, if anything changes, the UK's laws may have to change in concert? How do you do it? How do you make a trade deal when there's a third party, whether EU or whether UK is lining up its laws and associations with? But we'll see. Let's take a look at the chaos that took place in Parliament earlier today as Raab gives his presentation, his statement of the white paper. I love Parliament, man. I love it. I shouldn't have to hunt for this video, and I should be able to find this video somewhere else other than a Russian channel. Just saying, it shouldn't be that difficult to find. But here we are. Let's take a look. Oh, by the way, he gets scolded for this. He gets scolded like a child. He gets scolded like a child, but not just Burkrow, the speaker, but by the opposition, Shadow Brexit Secretary. It's awesome to watch.
By the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, Secretary Dominic Raab.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with your permission, I will make a statement about the UK's future relationship with the European Union. Can I start by paying tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Halton Price and Howden, and his Herculean efforts, along with my honourable friend, the member for Wickham.
By the way, I'm going to let his whole statement play out. I'm just let it play out. I'm going to let you see the entirety of this. I think it's about 5 minutes or so. It's not too long. So I'm not going to play the entirety of the statement. I'm going to play his statement, and I'm going to play the response from the Shadow Brexit Secretary. Also, dude, it's Herculean. It's Herculean. I'm joking about the accent. Let's keep going.
And the wider DEXU team to get us to this point in both the negotiations, but also with the successful passage of the EU withdrawal bill through Parliament. It is a striking achievement. My right honourable friend is a loss to government, but I suspect, with the mildest apprehension, a considerable gain to this House. Mr. Speaker, today we published the government's white paper on the UK's future relationship with the EU. It is a new and detailed proposal for a principled, pragmatic and ambitious future partnership between the UK and the EU in line with the policy agreed at Chequers last week. I have now placed a copy of the white paper in the libraries of both houses. But let me briefly set out the key proposals. Mr. Speaker, the government is determined to build a new relationship that works both for the UK and the EU, one grounded in our shared history, but which also looks to a bright and ambitious future, a relationship that delivers real and lasting benefits to both sides. First, Mr. Speaker, the White Paper confirms the UK will leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019, forging a new way in the world, outside the single market, outside the customs union. It safeguards the constitutional and economic integrity of the UK. It reclaims the UK's sovereignty, and it protects our economic interests by minimising the risk of any disruption to trade. Mr. Speaker, it delivers on the instruction we received loud and clear from the British people to take back control over our laws, our borders and our money. And in delivering on this vision, the government proposes an innovative and unprecedented economic partnership based on open and free trade, maintaining frictionless trade through a new UK-EU free trade area for goods underpinned by an ongoing common rule book, covering only those rules necessary to provide for frictionless trade at the border.
Just so we're clear, I gotta be honest, I hate political jargon. Just tell me what the fuck you're trying to say. I hate political jargon. I have no idea what he just said. Now, I do know what he just said because I've read the white paper. I've read enough stuff about it where I can have a general idea of what he's trying to say, but okay, I said that poorly, but listen to what he's saying very precisely. That's all. We're taking back control of our borders. Great. That's awesome. Now, we're also going to guarantee or try to minimize anything for frictionless trade. Great. How do you do that? How do you do that? That's what everyone keeps saying. How do you do that? Well, the only way you're going to do that, based on what the EU is saying, is regulatory alignment, meaning, yes, we're taking back our laws. Yes, we're taking back control of our money. Yes, we're doing all of this stuff, but we are also going to take the rules of the EU, because if we don't, we're not going to get access to the single market. I had a friend of mine who said it's like, yeah, I think this is similar, where he says, look, I've smoked pot every day for 20 years, but I'm not addicted. Yes, we have control of our rules, but our rules just so happen to coincide with the European Union. Let's keep going. Just saying, listen to what he's saying very closely.
This will support business. It will meet our shared commitments to Northern Ireland and Ireland, avoiding reliance on the so-called backstop solution. A key component of this will be our proposal for a facilitated customs arrangement, a business-friendly model that removes the need for a new routine customs check and controls between the UK and the EU, whilst enabling the UK to control its own tariffs to boost trade with the rest of the world.
That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. He's giving you magic at this point. I'm just saying that process. Look, the problem here is the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We know that part. The EU has already said this tariff idea is dead on arrival. Now, it's possible that they may budge on it, but up to this point, this maximum facilitation, all this other stuff so far does not exist.
We want a deep and comprehensive deal on services based on the principles of international trade. And our approach minimises new barriers to service provision, allowing UK firms to establish in the EU and vice versa, and it provides for mutual recognition of professional qualifications. On financial services, we propose a new economic and regulatory approach with the EU that will preserve the mutual benefits of our uniquely integrated markets, while protecting financial stability and, critically, the autonomy of our own rulemaking. Crucially, our proposals on services provide the UK with regulatory flexibility in the sector, including our dynamic, innovative and digital sectors, which will in turn open up new possibilities in relation to trade with the wider. Mr. Speaker, as we leave the EU, free movement of people will come to an end. We will control the number of people who come to our country. We will assert stronger security checks at the border.
Order. The Secretary of State is trying to complete his statement in circumstances in which there is manifest discontent in the chamber. Let me say to the right honourable gentleman, whom I welcome to his new responsibilities and whom I congratulate on his promotion to the Cabinet, that I recognise that collective decisions are made upon these matters and they're not all his individual doing. It is a source of considerable unhappiness in this chamber, as is manifest and has been over the last hour or so on both sides of the House, that the right honourable gentleman is delivering a statement about a white paper, copies of which are not currently available to members of the House of Commons. And what I say to the right honourable gentleman is that it might be considered courteous now to indicate at the box, if he so wishes, in terms that brook of no misunderstanding, that he is, of course, perfectly happy for members to have copies of the white paper about which it is intended that they should question him. If he'd be good enough to make that clear, that would greatly assist the House. Were he not to do so, I think that the consequence in terms of chamber unhappiness would become that much more stark. Secretary of State.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, both for your warm words. The white paper should have been made available. It will be immediately. It will be made available.
How they get off being pissed off in Parliament. Like, I love it. There's no courtesy, there's no nothing. We're angry at you, you're a fucking asshole, you're reading those papers. Where's the paper? Where's the paper? And they're just screaming at him at the top of his lungs. And I love how Burkow comes in, politicizing and saying, manifestly unhappy. Hey, that's putting it nicely. That's putting it extraordinarily mildly. They're manifestly unhappy. God, I love it. I love it. I love British politics. I fucking love it. They're screaming at him. Now, if you've noticed, oftentimes, and this is one of those things Theresa May actually does really well, Jeremy Corbyn gets up and says, I thank the Prime Minister for making this statement available to me before coming to the box. Meaning, he has something by which to question or talk to her about, as opposed to not having access to the thing to which you're speaking. Meaning, you getting up there, they're not able to give you questions based on the document because they haven't read the document. How can they respond to your statement if they haven't necessarily been able to get into the details of your statement? And the politicized words that you use does not get across the reality of what's taking place. For example, Burkow saying manifestly unhappy is not the same thing as 30, 40 people screaming at the top of their lungs at you. Those things are different. If you and I were having a conversation about this and we were talking to somebody, let's say Bob is standing on the corner and Bob said, what happened? I say, yeah, they were manifestly unhappy. Does that really get across to Bob the reality of what had taken place? Not so much. If I say they were screaming at the top of their lungs at him, I mean, they were fucking angry. That does in a better way. You can never necessarily use the words to actually pierce the reality of something that's taken place. But there are some words and there's some phrases and there's some analogies that get you there closer than others. Burkow's political statement of manifestly unhappy doesn't quite get there, but we understand what he means as politics. My point here is the language that he's using in this statement in order to describe what's taking place and what they want is often politicized, and you sometimes need to dig into the details of what they're saying in order to understand it. The statement in and of itself is not necessarily enough to give you to actually pierce it. That's what I'm getting at. That's why they're angry. They have a right to be angry. Let's take a look at, let's let this play out.
Well, as soon as it's practically possible, and
Order. I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for what he said. I'm advised that copies are available to some people. If there are copies in the vote office, all I'm asking the right honourable gentleman is this. Is he content, as a member of Her Majesty's government, indeed the cabinet thereof, that members of Parliament should have a copy of the white paper about which they are to question him? It's quite a simple inquiry.
yes, of course, Mr. Speaker, and just for clarity, it's already available on the website for anyone that wished to procure it that way.
Order.
How are you trying to defend this, dude? Are you serious? Are you really trying to defend this? I'm sorry, we should have gotten it available to the other side. Our bad. Why are you trying to defend this shitty, ridiculous position? This is a bogus position to have to defend. And they gave it to the press. That guy who's standing up there trying to defend not giving the opposition the actual document to which they're speaking had already given it to the press. Let's keep going.
Order. I think
disgraceful.
I genuinely thank him for saying that, and I appreciate that he's attempting to cooperate. As the document is in the vote office, but the timing of the release of the document is a matter for those who own the document, in this case, the government. All I'm saying is the right honourable gentleman content that copies should be given out by the vote office immediately?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Can I just say to the order? I'll just say to the honourable gentleman member for Wickham, an immediate past minister in the Brexit department, and to the honourable lady member for Totnes, that I won't take points of order during the statement. Order, because the Secretary of State has to finish his statement. However, if there are members concerned that ordinarily if they leave the chamber to get a document, they're then precluded from taking part in the statement, I will waive that normal arrangement in this instance because I am concerned to operate in a way that serves members of the House. I can't see why there has to be... I always attach the very greatest importance to the observations of the Honourable Lady, but it foxes...
I love Burkow. I love that guy. And if I'm not mistaken, that guy's a conservative. Look, in American politics, all of them are hacks. All of them are hacks. There's some that are, less hackish than others, but all of them are hacks. All of them, for the most part, are biased political actors. They can't be trusted. If you're dealing with American politics, you need to be cynical as cynical can be because they are SOBs. There's nobody like Burkow in our politics. He's been fair to both sides. I've seen him. I remember when the conservative government under, I think it was Cameron, tried to take him out of his seat. He was able to beat it back. Impartial, fair. He takes his job seriously. It is an amazing thing to watch, and it's an amazing thing to behold. And every time I see him doing this job, I think to myself, God, I love that guy. Now, I don't know his personal politics. I don't know, which is another part of the reason I love the guy. He's in a position where his politics should not apply, in which case he rose and he plays that role extraordinarily well. This is just from my vantage point being here. I don't necessarily know how Berkow operates in the country itself, but this is an amazing thing to behold. That's all. If this was American politics, Berkow wouldn't have any issue with this at all. Berkow would essentially run it on. Labor would complain and bitch and moan and everything else. Wouldn't matter. Berkow would also, if this was American politics, hush some while allowing others to talk. I don't think you realize the type of politics that takes place in America. Like, it's hard for people outside of this country to understand the level of politician that we have in this country based on the way that cash kind of runs the process, how hard and coarse and how shady and shameless our politicians are in comparison to what I see in other countries. They don't like a match. The worst Tory you have in your country doesn't like a match to the, you can say, the most corporatist of Democrats here. So let's keep going.
If she wants to beetle over to the chair and explain to me privately, she can, but it foxes me as to why she needs to make any point of order now. But if she's able, well, it's not good. I'm very pleased to see that the Right Honourable Gentleman for Chingford and Woodford Green has got a copy of the document. I think, meanwhile, let's hear the conclusion of the... I think we'll hear the conclusion of the... Well, I very order. Can I say to the Secretary of State? I think we should suspend the order. I say to the Secretary of State that it would be very unseemly, discourteous to him and to the members of the House for his statement to be delivered while copies are being distributed. I will therefore suspend the sitting of the House for 5 minutes. It is most regrettable that this situation has arisen, but I'm dealing in a way that I think is constructive with what has arisen. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. That's called either being an amateur or being a hack, and I'm not sure which one it is. I don't want to give you time to read this document because you guys are going to pull holes in this document. The Brexiteers hated this document, I think, more than Labour hated this document. If the government pushes this document, the government is going to lose. Brexiteers are going to vote against it. Labour is going to vote against it. Now, there is a chance that there are some turncoats, some traitors that are functioning as Blairites in Labour that may lean over to try to prop up Theresa May's government to help her get over the hurdle, breaking premise or breaking ranks with Corbyn's government. We don't know. But the way this looks, if all of Labour stays together and if the Brexiteers don't break, or at the very least don't try to take Theresa May out of her seat, if the government puts this up, the government will likely lose. Let's take a look at the statement afterwards. Look, she's floated this already, meaning people, for the most part, kind of got what was going to be in this document. They float this stuff as trial balloons to make sure people don't just have this immediate freak out reaction. Well, I mean, granted, I don't know how more of a freak out reaction you could get with part of our government essentially falling apart on live television, but whatever. Let's keep going. Let's listen to him finish his statement, and then I'm going to let, at the very least, the shadow Brexit secretary give his say-so. Sir Keith, I think his name is.
The clearest possible impression of government policy and intent today before making such judgments as she and others have to make. The exchanges on this statement will be run fully, and I think I will leave it there for today. And I thank the Secretary of State for his forbearance. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr.
Order. I invite the Secretary of State to continue with the delivery of his statement. Order. Just before that, I will exceptionally take the point of order. These situations don't arise very often, and it's very much to be hoped that they won't arise frequently in the future. I say, for the benefit of the people observing our proceedings, that I call the Honourable Lady to raise a point of order in the knowledge that she's the member for Totnes and the chair of the Health Select Committee, but she serves also as the chair of the Liaison Committee, which embraces all of the chairs of all of the select committees of this House. Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the exceptional importance of this document, and the fact is that members from both sides of the House have not had a chance to read it in advance, could I ask exceptionally, Mr. Speaker, that you suspend the sitting for longer to give members a chance to read it before the Secretary of State continues?
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her point of order. I don't think it's right for me to suspend for a sustained period off my own bat and in the expectation, perhaps even the knowledge, that there would be very strongly differing views about such a suspension. Almost as the Honourable Lady raised her point of order, I heard members expressing enthusiasm for the idea and members expressing opposition. I don't think that would be the right thing to do now, in all honesty. There will be an opportunity for a general debate on our relationship with Europe post-Brexit on Wednesday. Members know that there are other opportunities to put urgent questions. I know that the Honourable Lady is concerned about the legislative business on Monday. My advice to her is that she should form the clearest possible impression of government policy and intent today before making such judgments as she and others have to make. The exchanges on this statement will be run fully, and I think I will leave it there for today. And I thank the Secretary of State for his forbearance. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we leave the EU, free movement of people will come to an end. We will control the number of people who come to our country. We will assert stronger security checks at the border. The government will also seek a reciprocal mobility arrangement with the EU, in line with the approach we intend to take with other key trading partners around the world. In practice, having ended free movement, this is about enabling firms to move their top talent across border to deliver services, facilitating travel without a visa for tourism and business trips, and making sure that our students and youngsters in the UK and the EU continue to benefit from the educational opportunities in universities, colleges, and indeed the rich tapestry of cultural life right across the continent. Next, Mr. Speaker, the White Paper addresses Europe's security, which has and will remain the UK's security. That's why the government has made an unconditional commitment to maintain it. The government's proposal is for a new security partnership with the EU to tackle the shared, complex and evolving threats, enabling the UK and the EU to act together on some of the most pressing global challenges. It is important that the UK and the EU can continue operational cooperation on law enforcement and criminal justice to keep people safe right across Europe. Our proposals extend to other areas of cooperation of vital importance to the UK and the EU, including the continued protection and exchange of personal data, new arrangements on fishing, cooperative accords on science and innovation, culture and defence research. Mr. Speaker, when we leave the EU, the European Court will no longer have jurisdiction over this country. At the same time, we need to be able to interpret what we've agreed accurately and consistently, and manage any future bones of contention sensibly and responsibly. Our proposals provide for proper accountability and the consistent interpretation of UK-EU agreements by both parties. We envisage resolving disputes that may arise through arbitration, which is fair, balanced and reflective of global practice. And to provide the foundation for a new and enduring relationship, the agreement must be flexible enough to enable us to review and, if necessary, revise its operation over time in the best interests of this country, as is common in free trade agreements across the world. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make one thing very clear. We will not sign away our negotiating leverage or spend taxpayers' money in return for nothing. The financial settlement, which was agreed in December, substantially lower than EU demands, was agreed on the basis that it would sit alongside a deep and mutually beneficial future partnership. Mr. Speaker, we agreed we would meet our commitments as they fall due, with ever-declining payments over a finite period which add up to a fraction, a tiny fraction, of what would have been our net contribution. Both sides have been clear, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Indeed, that is in keeping with the spirit of Article 50. There should be a firm commitment in the withdrawal agreement requiring the framework for the future relationship to be translated into legal text as soon as possible. And of course, if one party fails to honour its side of the overall bargain, there will be consequences for the whole deal. For our part today, the UK government is demonstrating in good faith, with goodwill, our ambition, our resolve to ensure we do build that deep and special partnership with the publication of this white paper. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister first outlined the blueprint for a deep and special relationship with the EU at Lancaster House, expanded on it further in speeches in Florence, Munich, and at Mansion House. Those speeches have shaped, they continue to shape, our negotiations with the EU. I'm confident that a deal is within reach, given the success of the Prime Minister and her negotiating team so far.
You can't be serious. You can't be serious. The success of the Prime Minister's negotiating team, her team fell apart. Her team fell apart. All right, come on, man. Come on. Let's let him finish.
Most issues under the withdrawal agreement have by now been resolved, with a deal in place to secure the rights of over 3 million EU citizens living in the UK and around 1 million UK citizens living in the EU. And we have agreed a time-limited implementation period which gives businesses, government, citizens the certainty to plan their lives and invest for the future. We will shortly publish a white paper on the withdrawal agreement and implementation bill, setting out how we will give effect to the withdrawal agreement in domestic law and demonstrating to the EU that the UK is a dependable negotiating partner, one that will deliver on its commitments. So, Mr. Speaker, our discussions with the EU will squarely focus on our shared future. This white paper sets out how we can achieve that new partnership. Now, it is time for the EU to respond in kind. We approach these negotiations with a spirit of pragmatism, compromise, and indeed friendship. I hope, I trust, that the EU will engage with our proposals in the same spirit, and I plan to meet Michel Barnier next week to discuss the detail in person. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, the government is preparing in the event that that spirit of pragmatism and goodwill is not reciprocated. And on Monday, I spoke with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, and we agreed to step up our planning for the no-deal scenario so that the UK is ready for Brexit no matter what the outcome of these negotiations. It is the responsible thing for a government to do. Mr. Speaker, this white paper sets out the right Brexit deal, delivering on the result of the referendum, taking back control over our money, laws and borders, supporting the economy by maintaining a strong trading relationship after we've left, ending free movement whilst avoiding a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, or indeed between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, restoring sovereignty over Parliament and the authority of the UK Supreme Court, seizing the opportunity to forge new trade deals around the world, and maintaining cooperation with the EU in the many other areas that we prize, including security cooperation, to keep our people safe. This is our vision for a bold, ambitious and innovative new partnership with the EU. Principled and practical, faithful to the referendum, it delivers a deal that is good for the UK and good for our EU friends, and I commend this statement and the white paper to the House.
Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the new Secretary of State to his place? I'm sure he doesn't need me to tell him the size of the task he faces, not just negotiating with the Conservative Party, but eventually with the EU as well. So whatever our differences, and there are many, I genuinely wish him well. Can I gently say this? He's not got off to a very good start. the utter shambles of the last 20 minutes that led to the suspension of the House during a statement is clear evidence, Mr. Speaker, of why the government is in such a mess. From their sedentary positions, the front bench comment. Normally, I would say thanks in advance for the white paper. But on this occasion, my first question for the Secretary of State is why the government thought it appropriate to share the white paper in full with journalists at 9 a.m. this morning. I think they were given 15 minutes to read it before questions could be asked, unlike the 5 that we adjourned for, and give them hard copies, and only to provide the opposition with a copy 3 hours later. As he will know, my office has been onto his office all morning asking for this white paper. It was delivered at 11:55 a.m. and we saw the shambles that followed. So why was it, in this occasion, on this issue, appropriate to give it to the press at 9 a.m. and to the opposition 3 hours later?
Disgrace.
Mr. Speaker, that's not the only breach of protocol. I was handed the Secretary of State's statement as we finished business questions. But for the point of order, that would have been as he stood up. I think that's in breach of the ministerial code, which suggests 45 minutes. It is deeply discourteous. It's unacceptable. I have to say, having heard the statement, I didn't miss much. But the serious point is this, Mr. Speaker. The point of these statements, the point is to allow questions to be asked of the Secretary of State, and by proceeding in this way, this utter shambles, it denies proper scrutiny of this white paper. And I'm sure the House would like to know when the Secretary of State... I'm sure that... I'm sure that...
You haven't got a majority for this. Go on, Keir.
Well, the Secretary of State, in his sedentary position for the environment, I think went out on Sunday morning on one of the television shows and said the great thing about the Chequers compromise is that it has united the cabinet. That was just hours before the Brexit Secretary started penning his letter, and then the Foreign Secretary. So I think I won't be taking too much advice from him. As for the new Secretary of State, I'm sure the House would like to know when he was first shown the contents of the white paper. He wasn't at Chequers. So when did Ollie Robbins tell him that this was the policy he now had to sell? It's an important question.
Ouch! That's so brutal. You know, the funny part is I thought the same. I thought to myself, I was like, well, wait a minute. He wasn't on board for this. Like, ultimately, you had... Look, they were at Chequers. This was the thing that they were supposed to hammer out and everything else. The people who were involved in this process, meaning Brexit, Boris Johnson, Davis, left. The new guy comes on, and within a day or two, he's out here trying to sell what the Prime Minister gave him to sell. I love that question. When did you get this paper, and when did you start selling this? I love it.
Because 2 white papers, it appears, are being published today. The one now before the House, and the alternative one apparently drafted by his own department. That's now available, Mr. Speaker, in instalments on Conservative Home. In fact, it beat this white paper to publication. I listened very carefully to what the Secretary of State said earlier on the Today programme, and today when he described this white paper as innovative. Just for the record, can the Secretary of State confirm to the House this morning that he does actually agree with everything in the white paper that he's presenting? And turning to the substance, obviously we will have to look at the detail. But the purpose of the short Chequers statement issued on Friday was to hold the Cabinet together. It clearly failed in that objective, unravelling within 48 hours. If this white paper is more of the same, it will undoubtedly share the same fate. Mr. Speaker, across business communities, among trade unions, and I genuinely believe across this House, there is growing unity that the UK should remain economically close to the EU. And that means negotiating a comprehensive customs union with the EU 27. and a single market deal with the right balance of rights and obligations tailored to the UK. That combination is also the only way of delivering on the solemn promise of no hard border in Northern Ireland. The White Paper falls long short of that. So I'd like to ask the Secretary of State for a simple answer to a simple question. Is this White Paper the government's starting position in the next phase of the negotiations, in which case we can expect further evolution of the government's position? Or is it the government's final position, as far as they're prepared to go, new red lines? Let me develop on that theme. The White Paper sets out proposals for a facilitated customs arrangement.
One second. Listen very carefully to what he's saying here. This is politics. So ultimately, he's splitting the Tory government. He is going to put a knife or carve what it is to be a Tory. Which one do you want? You want to be a Tory Remainer or Brexiteer? What is the government going to do? Is this the government's starting position or final position? Brexiteers already hate where this is. If he gets up and says this is the government's starting position, then that means there's going to be further giveaways by the government itself. He's carving up the Tories. Let's take a listen. This is awesome. This is great. I love this.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. I'll just... Conversations regularly take place between members of respective benches. I'm not complaining about that. I simply thought it right that the conversation should be concluded and the interrogation could then continue, because that would seem to be a courteous way in which to proceed. Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't say anything because I assumed the Secretary of State was being briefed on the contents of the White Paper. As for the facilitated customs arrangement, we think the proposals would be a bureaucratic nightmare and unworkable, costly for business. It relies on technology that doesn't currently exist. If on analysis the EU 27 agree with that assessment and reject the proposal on a customs arrangement, is the government's position that we should then negotiate a customs union with the EU, as the majority in this House think we should? And on services, almost nothing. So again, if the government's proposal for mutual recognition and enhanced equivalence fail, what then? Mr. Speaker, in the short time I've had available, a number of features of this White Paper do leap out. Visa-free travel to work. Now, in his statement, the Secretary of State said that this was for business trips. In the White Paper, it says for business activity, and I wonder if he could clear up the difference between the two. That's Chapter 1, Paragraph 76. Chapter 1, Paragraph 89, reciprocal arrangements on social security. Could he elaborate for the House on what that is? Chapter 4, Paragraph 4, that this will take the form of an association agreement. Again, if the Secretary of State could elaborate on that. And on page 93, paragraph 42, the reference to the role of the European Court and references on interpretation. Perhaps he could elaborate to the House on that. But, Mr. Speaker, coming 15 months after Article 50 was triggered and just 3 months before the Article 50 agreement is expected, this White Paper has obviously arrived very late in the day. The Chequers statement unravelled in 2 days. When the details of this White Paper are examined, there's very few reasons to believe it will not suffer the same fate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Secretary of State. Secretary Dom.
I don't know how Theresa May is going to get this passed. I don't know how she's going to get this passed. Like, Labour is going to vote against it. Labour is going to vote against it for political reasons, but Labour is going to vote against it for good political reasons, by the way. But if you're going to sign up to this, what's the point? Why are you leaving? Like, honestly, and I'm saying this as somebody who's not for or against Brexit. You're getting a shittier deal. That's all I'm saying. You're getting a shittier deal. It's like, here lies whatever Brexit they thought Brexit was going to be. And again, this is somebody who's not for or necessarily against Brexit. But you have worked out a deal to which you are almost a vassal state. You're taking their rules. You're taking their laws. In some cases, you may be even subjected to the European Court of Justice. Why are you leaving if you're going to be in a worst case scenario? That being said, you can make the argument that, look, we are taking back our laws. We can do whatever we want with our laws. We just so happen to choose to do what the European Union is going with. But let's hear him response. Let's hear him answer. The public said they wanted to leave. The Tory government gave them the choice of whether they wanted to leave. The public says, yes, they want to leave. The Tory government just can't come out and say, look, if we leave, it is going to hurt. It is going to hurt either for a short period of time, but it's going to hurt. And for Corbyn's standpoint, Corbyn needs to be careful with the way he goes about this, because ultimately, whatever deal the Labour government is going to work out when Theresa May's government finally keels over, after all, there's a shelf life on zombies. At some point, even they disintegrate. He's going to want to enact a government that may run in contrast to what is allowed under the European Union. Brexit, in that case, may be a better thing for somebody like Jeremy Corbyn. The catch to that is, he has said he is leaving, meaning he has to come up with some arrangement that allows him to do what he wants from the standpoint of reorganizing Britain into a more socially friendly society, socially democratic society, while at the same token remaining in, I guess, closer alignment with the UK, with the EU. Either way, from the standpoint of, I want her government to collapse because I want my opportunity to do this, all of Labour is going to vote against what they're putting up. And I would make the case that they should.
Raab.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I just apologise for the late arrival? We will look into what happened with the clerks, and I would like to apologise to the honourable gentleman, and we will avoid it happening again. Can I also thank him for his generous welcome? I noticed it came in two parts, but I'm genuinely looking forward to working with him at this historic crossroads for our country. Like him, I'm a recovering lawyer. Like him, I voted to trigger Article 50. And we both stood on manifestos at the last general election which promised the British people we would leave the EU. I hope he will forgive me every now and again if I remind him of that. The honourable gentleman made some rather disobliging comments on unity. May I just ever so gently say to him that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones? There have been, at last count, 103 front-bench resignations from Labour under their current leader, a record unlikely to be rivalled any time in the foreseeable future. He made a number of procedural and process points which seemed rather displacement activity for anything Labour has to say on the substance of Brexit.
But, Order, I do intend to call everybody to question the Secretary of State. It is only fair that questions are heard with courtesy and that the replies are heard with courtesy. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful. He asked some specific points. He asked if I agree with the white paper. Yes, of course. He asked if the white paper was a starting point for the negotiation or the end point. This is a negotiation, but we're confident it is a principled, practical approach that can deliver a lasting deal, a good deal for this country and for the EU. He made some comments.
That's not an answer. That's not an answer. That's not anything. I think the problem with answering that question at yes is that Rees-Mogg head, who's already probably at 1,000 degrees, would literally explode and put blood all over the place, and Burcroft will have to call a border in order to pause the events. He doesn't want to answer that question. If you don't want to answer the question, why even bring the question up? He said, you asked whether this is a starting or end point, and I think it's a great principal position. Does that mean that's a start or end point? Say it's a start point, because that's what it is. Which means that there can be further devolution in the position that you're taking. Brexiteers are already against the position that you're taking, and you can go further into areas to which they do not want to go. That's why he doesn't want to answer that question. The Conservative Party is already being carved up by this particular issue. Answers like that make it worse.
It's about services. In fact, what we're looking to do is make sure that we have full autonomy over the rulemaking in relation to services, which will be with arrangements for recognition so that we retain our service provision between the UK and the EU, but freed up to trade in services more energetically and more liberally with the trade deals we do right across the world. On free movement, the white paper is clear if he wants to read it in good faith and understand our position. We've made clear we're ending free movement. That means we're going to take back control of our borders. It means that we will have stronger security checks at the border. It also means we'll have control over the number of people that come to this country. At the same time, we want Britain to be an open, outward-looking country. We want to encourage and facilitate business trips from the EU to the UK. That's common sense. We want to make sure there's visa waiver travel for tourism, for holidays for families. That's common sense. And of course, for students and those young people wanting to engage in research or go to universities or indeed engage in the cultural activities across the continent, we would obviously want to have sensible arrangements on that. That is common sense too. Mr. Speaker, he talked about the customs union and the single market. He needs to be clear. If Labour's position is to remain in the single market or the customs union, if, as he said before, freedom of movement is up for negotiation, his words, not mine, it breaks every promise every Labour candidate made at the last election, which was to end free movement. This government, Mr. Speaker, now stands ready to work with the EU over the coming weeks ahead of the European Council in October. We must move at pace. We must negotiate with resolve to deliver the prosperous and secure future that all our peoples deserve.
Mr. Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, may I welcome, first of all, my right honourable friend to the Cabinet. I've believed for a long time that it was a place that he should have been in before. Can welcome him, however, I also recognise that this is a very complex issue. My own personal views on this will be no secret to him. I have deep misgivings about what the government is proposing, but I would like, having voted to leave, I voted to leave, not to half leave. But I do want to say to my right honourable friend, paragraph 7D, to pursue what the right honourable gentleman said on the opposition, we have seen very little about the migration proposals, and these seem to be out there as part of what might be referred to as negotiating capital. So to follow this question, which is quite legitimate, I think, in paragraph 7D, the phrase here at the end of it is arrangements that the UK might want to offer to other close trading partners in the future. My simple question is, when the government goes to discuss, negotiate, or confer with the EU, whichever phrase suits, does he believe that they would be prepared to withdraw the rights to benefits for those who come without jobs?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend. Let me give him some assurance. Free movement will end. It is not up for negotiation. Equally, as countries right around the world do when they engage in free trade negotiations, the issue of visas is often considered alongside it, and that's the approach that we will take.
Yeah. Deirdre Brock.
Mr. Speaker, and of course I too must wish the Cabinet Secretary the very best of British luck with his new role. Brexit, of course, was a disastrous outcome of Tory infighting, and it now looks like the Tory compromise from last week is also falling victim to Tory infighting, an embarrassment and massively damaging. In January last year, the Prime Minister laid out 12 principles to underpin her Brexit process. The first was certainty and clarity. We have had neither. The take-home from this latest Brexit white paper seems to be that we are leaving the EU, but we're putting in place regulations to comply with EU regulations on the movement of goods, so we'll have no say in their decisions, but we'll abide by them. So what is the mechanism that will check the UK's regulatory compliance with EU rules to allow access to the market? Will the UK use EU standards in negotiations on other trade agreements, or will there be a whole set of different standards for each agreement? Even more importantly, though, is that services make up 80% of the UK's economy, and paragraph 48 of the White Paper says the UK and the EU will not have current levels of access to each other's markets. That is the government limiting the sector's access to the world's biggest market. That is massively damaging. What measures will the government bring in to compensate for that bizarre and unhelpful move? Scotland is right in the firing line with this Brexit dither and indecision, damaged yet again by Tory infighting and intransigence. Isn't it time the government accepted that this is a wrong-headed scheme and kept us in the single market and customs union? It would be well advised to take the measured and sensible approach recommended by the Scottish Government ahead of last week's JMC. Will that be considered? Now, the government's own analysis showed that Brexit is massively damaging, no matter what protections are offered. Will the government now listen to wiser heads and reverse course for everyone's good and stay in the single market and customs union? And lastly, Mr. Speaker, what on earth is happening in this place? Not only did opposition parties get copies of the white paper appallingly late, it is customary for party spokespeople to receive cited statements before ministers rise to their feet, not during, as happened here. This government's contemptuous treatment of this Parliament is once again laid bare for all to see.
I like that word, contemptuous. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's like 3 hours long. It would take another hour and a half to do. But you guys get the hint of what's taking place in the UK from the standpoint of these two guys fighting and battling it out. Yeah, I love this. All right, let's see who's here. Inventing the wave. You don't have to keep people out to have a border. It's practical to use borders to identify people and give them legal passing. Yeah, I don't think borders are insane. I'm taking my lone 85-year-old across the street for perhaps her final birthday dinner. Let's say Jamal's comment, less fun to... good night. Kinky. Let's go to bed. I'm up. I dozed off for like 3 hours. I'm up. I'm wide awake. I'm taking my lone 85-year-old across the street neighborhood out. That's very cool, Kinky. That's badass of you. Very badass of you. But yeah, British Parliament, Dominic Raab, amateur hour, Parliament freaking out, losing it, people pissed off, and delivering a white paper, which is essentially keeping a certain amount of regulatory alignment. Brexiteers don't like it. Labour certainly doesn't like it. And it seems that Theresa May may not necessarily have the political clout in order to win a vote with this particular white paper. Stay tuned. We'll keep an eye on it. British Parliament. It's fucking lovely. I love it. All right, so I'm going to end this one because, again, I have one or two more that I want to do before I turn in. Yes, I follow British politics, so I try to keep track. This document is laughable. I will either be discredited outright or changed so much as to be completely different document within a matter of weeks. You know, the funny part is they he couldn't answer that question. Is this a starting point or an end point? It's a starting point. He doesn't want to say that. He can't say that. The moment that he says it's a starting point, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to scream at the top of their lungs that we call for Brexit. We said Brexit. This is not Brexit. This is a vassal state. We're taking the laws of the UK, of the European Union. They're going to be pissed. You already have a difficult... Meaning this is splitting her government already. Already. If they're going to budge on some of that stuff, and the moment they turn that stuff into language, and you start getting into this movement of people and everything else, if the European Union just says, we're a rules-based organization, we can't bend the rules on this stuff. If you want access to the single market, movement of people comes with it. What are they going to do? Now, they say they're taking steps for a hard Brexit. You better take steps for a hard Brexit, because I don't know if the European Union is going to budge on it, and it's very possible that the government itself will not budge, meaning you would not get the number of votes necessary from the Brexiteers to get you over the finish line. And again, just to make this point clear, the Brexiteers have already said they will vote against the document as it is written if Theresa May is going to budge any closer to what the European Union wants. How's she going to get the votes? Actually going to get the votes. So I'm going to end this here. No one can answer a question like that while they're in negotiation. No, they can't. They can't. They can't. Sound. What's wrong? You can't hear me? What's wrong with the sound? Hold on. I don't think anything changed, but no, my volume is fine. What am I missing? You guys can't hear me? Oh, sound is fine. All right, just making sure. All right, just making sure. All right, so I'm going to end this. I have another one that I want to do after this, because I want to go into a little. Well, he gave you the white paper. He gave you the basic details. I mean, ultimately, what it boils down to is it's hard to know what that stuff is going to look like when they put it into words, and ultimately, this is just an ask. As he said, they're going with this idea of this kind of max facilitation, which is technology that doesn't exist, collecting tariffs at the border. The EU has said that position is unworkable, and that's somewhat of a no. I think they call it the Narnia strategy. So again, they're using that as a position, I guess, as a starting position. The other part has to do with services, which they're not necessarily including within the regulatory alignment. They believe that services is essentially they can pull business with service. They don't necessarily need. They believe they have their own strategy that they're going to use services. So that's on that part. But for the other stuff, it's regulatory alignment. They're going to have a customs union with the European Union. I hate to say this, but you are already in somewhat of a customs union with the European Union. But whatever. Whatever. So, let's see. I'm going to end this. He's Republican, but you know what? Like an ignorant DD Republican and weirdly progressive, so I cut him a break when he has no one. Oh, you guys are arguing. Alright, you guys are arguing. Alright, I'm going to end this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. This one went a little bit long, but it went long because I wanted you guys to see it. I hate when they show me little clips of videos. I hate it. I like seeing the entirety of what was taking place. Now, I didn't show the entirety of what was taking place, but you definitely got to see the main people in this. Dominic Raab and what is his name? Keith. Can't remember the last name. Steamer. I can't pronounce his last name. I can't remember his last name, but it's like Sir Keith, something to that effect. But you saw the shadow Brexit secretary and the Brexit secretary have their go at each other. You saw the discontent that was in Parliament based on the amateurish not giving people the paper itself. And I think you got a feel for the first guy you heard was a conservative. He was a Brexiteer. He was against this paper. Now, if I play this out, you see a lot of Brexiteers have a go at this paper. This paper is going to change. This paper is going to change. Either in the negotiation with the EU or even in the negotiation with the Parliament itself to try to get it passed. This paper will change. This paper is a starting point. And I hate to tell people who are Brexiteers, it will most likely get shittier, not better. So, I will end this. You guys have a good one. I will see you shortly, probably in the next 10-15 minutes, however long it takes to key up the next video. Thanks, guys.